What does it take to rule a nation for nearly 3 decades? Meet Blaise Compaoré, a name synonymous with Burkina Faso's history. Born on a sunny day of February 3, 1951, in the bustling city of Ouagadougou, then known as Upper Volta, Compaoré was a child of humble beginnings. As the son of Burkina Faso, he was destined to play a pivotal role in shaping the nation's history. Compaoré's journey to power was not a typical one. The path he followed was paved with military discipline, strategic alliances, and an unyielding ambition. As a young man, he was drawn to the military, an institution that promised not just order and discipline, but also an opportunity for advancement. He enlisted, proving his mettle and rising through the ranks with a rapidity that was both impressive and foreboding. Compaoré didn't stop at just being an ordinary soldier. His ambition and tactical acumen led him to ascend to the rank of captain in the Voltaic army. This was no small feat. It was a testament to his leadership skills, strategic thinking, and an indomitable will. But it was also a stepping stone to something much bigger. In the world of power politics, Compaoré was a player, and a formidable one at that. He understood the rules of the game and played them to his advantage. His rise was not just about military ranks, it was about power, influence, and control. It was about shaping the future of Burkina Faso. And as history would have it, Compaoré was destined to do just that. But power doesn't come without its challenges. It demands sacrifice, cunning, and a ruthless pursuit of one's goals. Compaoré was no stranger to these demands. He was a military man at heart, and in the world of power politics, he was a seasoned player. A military man at heart, Compaoré was no stranger to power struggles. His journey to the presidency was just beginning, and it was a path that would be marked by both triumph and tragedy. In a twist of fate, Compaoré's path to power was paved with betrayal. The year was 1983 when Compaoré played a critical role in a military coup that changed the course of Burkina Faso's history. This coup propelled his close friend and ally Thomas Sankara to the presidency. Sankara, a charismatic and visionary leader, was heralded as the Che Guevara of Africa, and Compaoré was right by his side, his trusted friend and ally. But the winds of power and ambition can change direction swiftly. Fast forward to 1987, and the landscape of Burkina Faso was set to drastically change once again. Compaoré, now a seasoned player on the political stage, masterminded another coup. But this time, it wasn't against a political adversary, it was against his friend, his ally, Thomas Sankara. The details of that fateful day in October remain shrouded in mystery and controversy. What we do know is that it was brutal and swift. Sankara was assassinated, his life cut short, his dreams for a better Burkina Faso left unfulfilled. The friend, the ally who stood by his side just years before, was now the orchestrator of his demise. Compaoré's betrayal was complete. In the wake of Sankara's assassination, he assumed the presidency. He had successfully toppled his ally, and now, he held the reins of power. The man who had once been a loyal friend had become the architect of Sankara's downfall. The assassination of Thomas Sankara remains one of Africa's most notorious political killings, a stark reminder of the volatile and often treacherous path to power. The man who was once a beacon of hope for his country was betrayed by his closest confidant, a betrayal that would forever change the course of Burkina Faso's history. In a single stroke, Compaoré had toppled his ally and assumed control. The stage was now set for Compaoré's presidency, a chapter in Burkina Faso's history that would be marked by both progress and controversy. With the presidential mantle, Compaoré began to reshape Burkina Faso. His presidency was marked by a drive for economic liberalization, as he sought to open up the country's markets and encourage foreign investment. His policies were aimed at fostering a more business-friendly environment, an effort that was met with both praise and criticism. Compaoré was also determined to improve Burkina Faso's standing on the global stage. He actively sought to strengthen ties with Western nations and international organizations. This diplomatic maneuvering was a strategic attempt to gain international support and secure much-needed financial aid for the country's development projects. On the home front, Compaoré implemented a number of social reforms. Education, healthcare, and infrastructure development were among his top priorities. He aimed to improve the living standards of the Burkinabe people by providing better access to essential services. However, these reforms often fell short of the high expectations set by his administration. The Compaoré era was not without its dark side, however. His rule was often described as authoritarian, with power concentrated in the hands of a select few. His government was accused of suppressing political opposition and dissent, often resorting to violent means. Moreover, his administration was plagued by allegations of human rights abuses, including arbitrary arrests, torture, and extrajudicial killings. Critics argued that Compaoré's policies were more about consolidating power and less about the welfare of the Burkinabe people. They pointed to the wide gap between the country's rich and poor as evidence of his failure to address inequality. Furthermore, they accused him of using the country's resources to enrich himself and his allies. Compaoré's presidency was a period of change, but not without its controversies. His policies helped to modernize Burkina Faso in some ways, but they also perpetuated a system of governance that many saw as oppressive and corrupt. This complex legacy continues to shape the country's political landscape long after his departure from office. Compaoré's grip on power was not left unchallenged. Indeed, his political career was marked by controversy from the start. The former military officer, turned head of state, found himself in the middle of a complex political chessboard. His moves were often met with accusations of fraud and suppression of the opposition. Time and again, Compaoré seemed to checkmate his adversaries, securing multiple election victories. But these wins were not without their share of controversy. Elections under Compaoré's rule were frequently marred by allegations of widespread fraud. The opposition often claimed that the voting process was manipulated and that their voices were suppressed. Despite these claims, Compaoré continued to emerge victorious, his reign seemingly unassailable. But it wasn't just the elections that caused a stir. His decision to amend the constitution in the year 2000 was a significant turning point. This amendment removed term limits, allowing him to stay in power beyond the originally mandated 2 terms. This move was seen by many as a blatant attempt to consolidate power, undermining the principles of democracy. This change to the constitution meant that Compaoré could run for re-election indefinitely, effectively making him a leader for life. As expected, this did not sit well with many Burkinabe citizens and the international community. Yet, Compaoré seemed unfazed by the criticism, continuing to hold the reins of power with an iron grip. The removal of term limits was a clear demonstration of Compaoré's determination to hold on to power. However, it also sparked a growing discontent among the populace. This would eventually lead to widespread protests, marking the beginning of the end of his long-standing reign. Compaoré had secured his rule, but at what cost? His political maneuvers, while successful in keeping him in power, had also sown the seeds of his eventual downfall. As we will see in the next scene, the people of Burkina Faso would not stay silent forever. In 2014, the winds of change swept across Burkina Faso. This was the year the people found their voice, rising against Compaoré's attempts to cling to power. Streets that once bustled with everyday life became arenas of defiance, as widespread protests erupted across the nation. The citizens had borne the weight of Compaoré's rule for nearly 3 decades, but the prospect of his reign extending further was the spark that ignited their collective resistance. The outcry was loud, clear, and impossible to ignore. It echoed through the corridors of power, compelling regional leaders to intervene. Cornered by escalating demonstrations and mounting international pressure, Compaoré had no choice but to relinquish his grip on the presidency. He resigned, leaving behind a nation on the precipice of change. But his departure wasn't the end of his journey, it was the beginning of his life in exile. He found refuge in Ivory Coast, far from the land he once ruled. Compaoré's reign had come to an end, but his legacy was far from forgotten. Blaise Compaoré's legacy is as complex as the man himself. Supporters of Compaoré laud his presidency for driving economic growth and bringing stability to Burkina Faso. They point to his liberalization policies, which opened up the nation to international trade and investment, creating opportunities and raising living standards for many Burkinabe. On the other hand, critics paint a starkly different picture. They decry Compaoré's authoritarian rule, riddled with alleged corruption and suppression of dissent. His willingness to bend constitutional rules to extend his stay in power is seen as a sign of his disregard for democratic principles. The violent response to protests during his later years further tarnished his reign. The story of Blaise Compaoré is a microcosm of the challenges inherent in leadership, particularly in African nations. It highlights the delicate balancing act between pursuing economic development and maintaining political freedoms. Blaise Compaoré, a man who ruled for nearly 3 decades, leaves behind a legacy as complex as the nation he once led.